The night a wife invites her husband's rumored mistress to dinner, someone always expects a scandal. But no one expects the truth. The invitation was written in flawless cursive on thick ivory paper, sealed inside an envelope so elegant it looked more like a wedding announcement than the beginning of a confrontation. Claire Bennett stared at it for a long moment before sliding it across the polished marble countertop. Her fingers never trembled. Her breathing never changed. "Please join my husband and me for dinner this Friday at 7, it read. No accusations. No hidden insults. No desperate pleas. Just one sentence that would soon leave an entire city speechless. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Sinclair penthouse, Manhattan shimmered beneath a cool October evening. Yellow taxi lights drifted through the streets like tiny stars while helicopters crossed the darkening sky above the Hudson River. Inside, everything was impossibly quiet. The antique grandfather clock ticked softly. A kettle hummed in the kitchen. Fresh rosemary scented the air from the roast slowly cooking in the oven. It looked like the home of a woman preparing for family dinner, not the home of a billionaire's wife who had spent the last 6 months watching headlines tear her marriage apart one photograph at a time. Every grocery bag had been unpacked by her own hands. Every wine glass had been polished until it reflected the chandelier above. Every plate had been placed exactly where it belonged. Claire wanted perfection. If her marriage was about to end, she refused to let it happen surrounded by chaos. Her phone buzzed across the counter. Another notification. Another entertainment website. Another blurry picture of Ethan Sinclair leaving a downtown hotel beside Olivia Hart. The caption was almost identical to yesterday's. America's favorite billionaire has been spotted again with the mysterious brunette believed to be his secret lover. Claire didn't open the article. She didn't need to. She had already memorized every angle of those photographs. Every headline. Every whispered rumor from charity galas, business dinners, and grocery stores where strangers thought sunglasses made them invisible. The city had already decided who Olivia was. The tabloids had crowned her the billionaire's mistress months ago. Friends had stopped asking questions because they assumed they already knew the answers. Even the employees inside Sinclair Holdings had begun avoiding Claire's eyes during company events, offering sympathetic smiles that somehow hurt more than cruel words ever could. Yet despite everything, Ethan had never admitted to an affair. He had never offered an explanation either. That silence had become the loudest sound in their marriage. Claire picked up the envelope one final time, walked toward the front door, and handed it to the waiting courier. "Make sure Ms. Olivia Hart receives this personally," she said with a calm smile. The courier nodded before disappearing into the elevator. Claire closed the door gently behind him, rested one hand against the cool wood, and whispered into the empty apartment, "Come to dinner, and let's finally find out which one of us has been living inside the biggest lie." The invitation was delivered at exactly 4:17 that afternoon. Olivia Hart looked at the elegant envelope resting on her desk as if it had somehow appeared out of thin air. Outside her office window, downtown Manhattan pulsed with its usual rhythm of honking traffic and hurried professionals crossing crowded intersections, but inside the conference room overlooking Bryant Park, everything suddenly felt still. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Claire Bennett. For a long moment, Olivia simply stared at the words without opening the envelope. Her assistant stepped inside carrying another stack of legal documents. "Your 5 o'clock meeting has been confirmed," she said before noticing Olivia's expression. "Is everything all right?" Olivia forced a polite smile. "Yes. Thank you." The door closed again, leaving silence behind. Carefully, she unfolded the invitation and read every word twice. There was no anger hidden between the lines. No sarcasm. No threat. Somehow that unsettled her more than if Claire had written a page filled with accusations. Meanwhile, nearly 5 miles away, Claire stood in front of the enormous dining table inside the Sinclair penthouse, adjusting a single crystal wine glass by less than an inch before stepping back to study the arrangement. 12 white roses rested in the center beneath a chandelier that cast warm golden reflections across polished silverware. Everything looked exactly the way it had on their wedding anniversary 2 years earlier. She remembered laughing as Ethan tried to cook pasta from an old family recipe, burning the sauce while insisting he could handle dinner without help. They had laughed until midnight, sitting on the kitchen floor eating takeout instead. Back then, headlines only called him America's youngest self-made billionaire. They had not yet learned to turn every smile into gossip. Claire walked into the living room where dozens of framed photographs lined the shelves. Vacations in Colorado. A charity marathon in Chicago. Thanksgiving with Ethan's grandmother in Connecticut. In every picture, he looked at her the same way, as though the cameras had disappeared and only she remained. She picked up one photograph from a beach in Santa Monica. Ethan was barefoot, holding her sandals after she insisted on walking through the surf. Neither of them had noticed someone secretly taking the picture. It had never appeared online because there had been nothing sensational about a husband carrying his wife's shoes. She smiled for only a second before placing it back exactly where it belonged. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was not another gossip alert. It was Ethan. His message contained only 6 words. Working late. Do not wait up. Claire read the sentence twice before locking the screen without replying. Once upon a time he would have called. He would have asked about her day, complained about impossible board meetings, and promised to bring home her favorite cheesecake from the bakery on Madison Avenue. Now conversations had become carefully measured exchanges that sounded more like business emails than marriage. She glanced toward the dining room where 3 place settings waited beneath soft candlelight. One chair belonged to her. One belonged to her husband. The third belonged to the woman everyone believed had stolen him away. Claire quietly folded the linen napkins one final time and whispered to herself, tomorrow night, somebody finally tells the truth, and no matter what happens after that, none of our lives will ever be the same again. 3 years earlier, before gossip magazines learned to follow every black SUV that carried Ethan Sinclair across Manhattan, Claire Bennett had never imagined she would become part of a world where strangers debated her marriage over morning coffee. She was teaching art classes at a community center in Brooklyn, spending her evenings helping teenagers paint murals on old brick walls and dreaming about opening a neighborhood studio where children could create without worrying whether their families could afford expensive supplies. Her apartment was small, her car had more than 140,000 miles on it, and her bank account demanded careful budgeting every month, but she never considered herself poor. She considered herself free. Then everything changed in a single week. The community center announced it was closing after losing its largest donor, and at almost the same time, Claire learned that her late father's family foundation had accumulated enough legal and financial complications to force the sale of the building that had served local children for nearly 30 years. She spent days searching for grants, calling investors, and attending meetings that always ended with polite smiles and disappointing answers. During one of those meetings she met Ethan Sinclair for the first time. He arrived 15 minutes late, still wearing the navy suit from a board meeting downtown, carrying a notebook instead of the entourage everyone expected a billionaire to bring. He listened far more than he spoke. When the presentation ended and every other executive quietly declined involvement, Ethan remained seated. "Tell me why this place matters," he asked. Claire did not mention numbers or financial forecasts. Instead, she described a 12-year-old boy who had painted through his parents' divorce and a shy little girl whose confidence had grown with every canvas she finished. Ethan never interrupted. Days later he surprised everyone by agreeing to fund the center, but the negotiations quickly became more complicated than either of them expected. Sinclair Holdings was already fighting a corporate takeover attempt fueled by investors who questioned Ethan's long-term stability after years of refusing political marriages and high society expectations. One senior board member quietly suggested that a married chief executive projected reliability the market could trust. Claire hated the idea the moment she heard it. Ethan hated it even more. Yet after weeks of impossible conversations, they signed an agreement that seemed practical rather than romantic. They would marry, protect the foundation, stabilize the company, and quietly continue living separate lives until the arrangement naturally expired. The contract was precise, respectful, and surprisingly kind. It included freedom, privacy, and one handwritten sentence Ethan added himself after the lawyers had finished. Neither of us owes the other a performance. Only honesty. Claire remembered reading those words twice before signing beneath them. Neither of them expected honesty to become the one promise that would eventually prove hardest to keep. Somewhere between charity events, Sunday breakfasts, late-night conversations over burned homemade dinners, and long drives through New England with no photographers following behind, the agreement slowly stopped feeling like paperwork. It began to feel like home. Neither one ever announced the moment they fell in love. They simply woke up one morning realizing the contract had quietly become the least important part of their marriage. Friday arrived wrapped in a cold November rain that painted silver streaks across the windows of the Sinclair penthouse. Claire woke before sunrise, although she had barely slept at all. She stood quietly in the kitchen with a steaming mug of coffee, watching the city slowly come alive 30 floors below. Delivery trucks rolled through damp streets, commuters hurried beneath umbrellas, and somewhere in the distance a ferry crossed the Hudson River beneath a pale gray sky. Everything outside looked ordinary. Inside, every minute carried the weight of a decision that could either destroy her marriage or finally save it. She opened the refrigerator and carefully removed fresh vegetables, rosemary, lemons, and a beautiful fillet of salmon she had picked up from a specialty market the afternoon before. Ethan's favorite meal. That detail almost made her laugh. It seemed ridiculous that after months of unanswered questions she still remembered exactly how long he liked the asparagus roasted and how he always squeezed fresh lemon over the fish before taking the first bite. Love had strange habits. It stayed alive inside ordinary routines even when trust struggled to survive. Throughout the afternoon she moved from room to room making tiny adjustments. She polished crystal glasses again even though they already sparkled. She replaced white candles with ivory ones because the warmer color softened the room. Soft piano music drifted through hidden speakers, barely louder than the rain tapping against the glass. There would be no shouting tonight. No dramatic confrontation. She wanted the evening to feel almost uncomfortable in its kindness. At 3 o'clock, her phone rang. It was her closest friend, Megan. "Please tell me you changed your mind," Megan said without even saying hello. "Everyone is talking about this. If that woman walks into your home, she wins." Claire smiled sadly. "Maybe nobody wins until someone tells the truth." Megan sighed. "Claire, photographs do not lie." Claire looked toward the dining table where 3 neatly folded linen napkins rested beside polished silverware. "Sometimes people do." After ending the call, she walked upstairs and opened the small cedar box where she kept personal keepsakes. Inside rested ticket stubs from a Broadway show Ethan had surprised her with on their first anniversary, a seashell they found together in Santa Monica, and folded beneath everything else, the original marriage contract. The paper had softened along its edges from being opened only a handful of times over the years. She gently traced the final handwritten sentence with her fingertips. "Neither of us owes the other a performance. Only honesty." Slowly she returned the contract to the box instead of bringing it downstairs. Tonight was not about legal agreements. It was about discovering whether honesty had survived beneath months of silence. Just after 6:30, headlights appeared below as a familiar black sedan turned into the underground entrance of the building. Ethan was home earlier than expected. Claire heard the elevator doors open moments later, followed by steady footsteps approaching the apartment. He entered carrying only his leather briefcase, his expression calm but unusually tired. Their eyes met across the living room. He noticed the candles first. Then the perfectly arranged table set for 3. Finally he looked back at Claire, confusion quietly replacing exhaustion. Before he could ask a single question, the doorbell echoed through the apartment. Right on time. Claire walked to the door before Ethan could say another word. She opened it slowly, and for the first time, the 2 women stood face to face. Olivia Hart looked nothing like the image painted by gossip magazines. She wore a charcoal gray wool coat damp from the rain, simple pearl earrings, and carried a small navy gift bag tied with a white ribbon. There was no confident smile of triumph, no dramatic entrance, only the expression of someone stepping into a room she never wanted to enter. "Mrs. Sinclair," Olivia said softly. "Thank you for inviting me." Claire answered with the same quiet courtesy. "Please come in." Ethan remained frozen near the living room, his face draining of color as Olivia crossed the threshold. "Claire," he began, but she gently raised one hand. "Dinner first." The words were calm, yet impossible to argue with. Olivia carefully placed the gift bag on a side table. "I brought dessert." "I hope that was all right." Claire looked at the homemade pie inside the clear bakery box. "Apple cinnamon." Ironically, it had always been Ethan's favorite. For one brief second the silence became almost unbearable. "That was thoughtful," Claire replied before leading everyone toward the dining room. 3 chairs waited beneath the warm glow of the chandelier. Outside, rain continued sliding down the enormous windows, blurring the city lights into soft streaks of gold and white. Ethan instinctively reached for the chair beside Claire, but she quietly stopped him. "Please." She nodded toward the seat across from her. "Sit there tonight." He obeyed without another word. Olivia sat to Claire's right, carefully folding her hands in her lap. The table looked beautiful enough for a holiday celebration, yet nobody seemed to notice the food. Claire poured sparkling water into each crystal glass. The gentle sound echoed through the room because no one else was speaking. Finally Ethan broke the silence. "Claire, I should have told you she received the invitation." Claire looked at him with remarkable composure. "I assumed she would." He searched her face, trying to understand what she was thinking, but found nothing except quiet determination. She served the salmon onto each plate exactly as she always had, adding roasted asparagus and small red potatoes before taking her own seat. "Please eat before everything gets cold," she said. Olivia lifted her fork politely but hesitated. Ethan barely touched his food. Claire noticed both reactions and almost smiled at the strange irony. The city believed this table held betrayal, jealousy, and broken promises. Instead it held 3 adults who seemed terrified of saying the wrong thing. After several minutes of uncomfortable small talk about the weather and holiday traffic, Claire reached beneath the table and picked up a large cream-colored envelope resting beside her chair. She placed it gently in the center of the table between the plates. Neither Ethan nor Olivia moved. Inside the envelope were dozens of glossy photographs collected over the past 6 months. Hotel entrances. Airport terminals. Charity galas. Business dinners. Every image showed Ethan and Olivia together from carefully chosen angles that seemed to tell only one story. Claire slowly spread the photographs across the white tablecloth like a deck of cards. Candlelight reflected across every glossy surface. She looked first at Ethan, then at Olivia. Her voice remained almost impossibly steady. "Before tonight ends, I only want one thing." She paused just long enough for both of them to look into her eyes. "I do not want excuses. I do not want apologies. I only want the truth. So tell me, what am I really looking at?" The room became so quiet that even the rain against the windows seemed louder than before. Ethan looked down at the photographs scattered across the white tablecloth. Some had been taken outside restaurants. Others showed him opening a car door for Olivia or walking beside her through crowded airports. From the right angle, every image suggested intimacy. From the wrong perspective, every moment looked like betrayal. Claire watched his face carefully. She had spent countless nights imagining this conversation. In some versions he confessed immediately. In others he became angry and walked away. What she had never imagined was silence. Ethan slowly exhaled before lifting his eyes toward her. "I know how this looks." Claire nodded once. "That is exactly why I invited both of you." Her voice remained remarkably calm, but inside her heart every unanswered question from the last 6 months seemed to press against her chest at once. "I gave you dozens of opportunities to explain." Every time I asked where you had been, you said work. Every time another photograph appeared, you said nothing. Ethan lowered his gaze again. Because I could not. Claire gave a faint, almost heartbreaking smile. Could not, or would not. Before he could answer, Olivia quietly placed her fork on the edge of her plate. Mrs. Sinclair. Claire gently interrupted her. Please call me Claire. Olivia hesitated before continuing. Claire. I understand why you believe what everyone else believes. Claire turned toward her. Do I? Olivia looked at the photographs for several long seconds. If I had only these pictures, I probably would too. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, as though he already knew what was coming next. Claire folded her hands together on the table. Then help me understand something. She picked up one photograph showing Ethan placing his hand lightly against Olivia's back as they entered a hotel. This one was taken outside the Lexington Grand Hotel. 2 months ago. You arrived together at 7:23 in the evening and left almost 3 hours later. She placed it back down before selecting another image. Here you are at La Maison restaurant. Candlelight. Private dining room. Another photograph followed. And this one was outside the airport in Boston. She looked directly at Olivia. Tell me why every place you visited together conveniently looked romantic. Olivia's expression softened with genuine sadness. Because somebody wanted it to. Claire frowned slightly. Ethan immediately looked toward Olivia, almost imperceptibly shaking his head. It was a silent warning. Claire noticed. She noticed everything. There it is, she whispered. That look. I have seen it before. Every time your name comes up, Ethan tries to protect you. Ethan leaned forward. Claire, please. No. Her answer was quiet but firm. Tonight nobody protects anyone. Tonight everyone tells the truth. Olivia slowly reached for the navy gift bag she had placed beside her chair when she first arrived. Instead of removing the bakery box inside, she reached beneath it and carefully pulled out a small black flash drive no larger than her thumb. She held it in her palm without speaking. Claire stared at the tiny device, confused. Ethan's shoulders tensed immediately. Olivia, he said quietly, not yet. Olivia looked first at Ethan, then at Claire. I think it is already too late for not yet. She gently placed the flash drive beside the photographs. Claire, before you decide whether your husband betrayed you, I need you to watch what is on this drive. After that, if you still believe the story everyone else believes, I will leave this apartment and never ask you to hear another word. Claire looked at the tiny black flash drive resting among the photographs as though it belonged to another world entirely. For a moment, nobody moved. The candles continued flickering softly, casting golden reflections across the polished table while rain traced quiet lines down the towering windows behind them. Ethan finally spoke, his voice lower than before. Claire, I wanted to tell you everything. More than once. But if I had, months of work would have collapsed overnight. Claire met his eyes without blinking. Then start now. Olivia slowly reached into her briefcase and removed a slim silver laptop. She did not rush. Every movement was careful, deliberate, almost respectful. She connected the flash drive, turned the screen toward Claire, and pressed play. The first image was not a romantic dinner or a hotel room. It was security footage from a conference room inside Sinclair Holdings. The timestamp showed nearly 6 months earlier. Claire immediately recognized the faces around the table. Senior executives. Board members. Investors. Ethan sat quietly near the end of the table while another man controlled the conversation. Tall, confident, impeccably dressed. Damian Cole, the company's chief financial officer. Claire had met him dozens of times at charity events and holiday parties. He had always smiled politely, remembered birthdays, and praised Ethan publicly as though they shared complete trust. The recording continued. Damian's voice filled the dining room. If Sinclair refuses the acquisition proposal again, we move to phase 2. Another executive asked quietly, and his wife? Damien smiled without humor. Public opinion will take care of that. Claire frowned. Olivia paused the video before opening another file. This time there were emails. Hundreds of them. Internal messages. Financial reports. Meeting schedules. One after another they revealed conversations that had never reached Ethan's desk. Projects deliberately delayed. Investor information quietly manipulated. Anonymous payments made to outside media consultants. Claire read one sentence twice before looking up. Create enough scandal and the market will stop trusting him. Olivia finally spoke. I am not your husband's mistress. She reached into her briefcase again and placed a leather identification wallet beside Claire's plate. I am outside legal counsel hired to investigate corporate fraud involving Sinclair Holdings and several investment firms. For the last 6 months, Ethan and I have been working under confidentiality agreements while gathering evidence. Claire opened the identification slowly. Olivia Hart. Corporate Litigation Specialist. Federal Cooperation Authorization. She stared at the card for several long seconds before looking toward Ethan. You hired her? Ethan nodded once. The board could not know. Neither could the people responsible. Claire's thoughts raced through every photograph spread across the table. Every hotel. Every airport. Every restaurant. Olivia quietly continued. Most of those meetings happened in public on purpose. We believed someone inside the company was following us. Eventually we realized they were doing more than following. She selected another folder from the laptop. Dozens of enlarged paparazzi photographs appeared side by side. Some showed the original uncropped images. Others displayed the versions published online. Claire immediately noticed what had been removed. In almost every original photograph, there had been other lawyers, investigators, accountants, or security personnel standing only a few feet away. The published versions cropped everyone else out, leaving only Ethan and Olivia together. Candlelit business dinners suddenly became imagined dates. Corporate strategy meetings became tabloid headlines. Airport security escorts disappeared from the frame entirely. Claire slowly lowered herself back into her chair, barely able to process what she was seeing. Ethan reached toward her across the table before stopping halfway, uncertain whether he still had the right. I knew people would believe the worst, he said quietly. I just never imagined one of those people would be the woman I was trying hardest to protect. Claire felt as though the room had tilted beneath her feet. Every headline she had cried over, every sleepless night spent wondering where Ethan had been, every sympathetic glance from strangers suddenly seemed carefully manufactured by someone she had trusted. She looked again at Damien Cole's face frozen on the laptop screen. The polished executive who had toasted their anniversary at company events. The man who had shaken her hand and asked about the community art center as though he genuinely cared. Ethan quietly closed the laptop before looking directly at her. Damien has been preparing this for almost a year. At first we believed he was manipulating financial reports. Then Olivia uncovered something much bigger. Olivia opened another folder containing a complex network of corporate charts connected by blue and red lines. Several shell companies have been quietly purchasing Sinclair Holdings stock through third-party investment funds. Individually, none of the purchases attracted attention. Together, they were designed to gain enough voting power to force Ethan out as chief executive officer. Claire studied the diagram, trying to follow the connections. And the scandal? Olivia nodded. If investors stopped believing in Ethan's leadership, the remaining shareholders would panic. A damaged reputation could succeed where ordinary business negotiations failed. Ethan leaned back slowly in his chair. Damien knew I would never approve selling the company. He also knew the board would hesitate if my personal life became front-page news every week. Claire looked toward the photographs still scattered across the table. Suddenly every image felt less like evidence and more like pieces of someone else's carefully written script. So every photograph. She whispered. Someone always knew where we would be, Olivia answered. Restaurant reservations that should have remained private somehow reached photographers. Flight schedules appeared online before we arrived. Even confidential meetings became tabloid stories within hours. Claire frowned. There had to be someone helping him. Ethan gave a slow nod. There was. We simply have not identified everyone involved yet. The weight of those words settled heavily over the room. If Damien still believed his plan was working, then whoever remained inside Sinclair Holdings was probably still watching every move Ethan made. Claire's mind drifted back through the past several months. She remembered charity dinners where guests suddenly stopped talking when she entered the room. She remembered reporters appearing outside restaurants where only a handful of people knew Ethan would be eating. Then another memory surfaced. 3 weeks earlier, Damien himself had approached her after a fundraising gala. He had spoken with gentle concern, suggesting she deserved honesty and happiness. At the time, she thought he was offering compassion. Now she realized he had been carefully feeding her doubts. Claire closed her eyes for a brief moment before opening them again. He wanted me to stop trusting Ethan. Olivia answered softly. Because a divided marriage is easier to manipulate than a united one. Silence settled over the table once more, but this time it felt different. The silence no longer belonged to suspicion. It belonged to understanding. Claire looked at Ethan, seeing not distance but exhaustion. 6 months of carrying a secret had left quiet lines around his eyes she had never noticed before. Then she asked the one question neither of them expected. What happens if Damien believes I still think you betrayed me? Ethan and Olivia exchanged a quick glance. Neither answered immediately. A slow realization spread across Olivia's face before the corner of her mouth lifted into the faintest smile. Then, she said carefully, for the first time since this investigation began, we might actually have an advantage. The clock on the dining room wall had just passed 8:30 when the conversation changed from painful memories to impossible decisions. The untouched dinner had grown cold, but none of them noticed anymore. Claire slowly gathered the scattered photographs into a neat stack before placing them back inside the cream-colored envelope. She no longer looked at them with heartbreak. She looked at them as evidence of a carefully designed illusion. Ethan watched her quietly, uncertain what she would say next. For months he had prepared himself for anger, disappointment, even divorce. What he had never imagined was seeing Claire think through the situation with the same calm determination that had first impressed him years ago. She looked toward Olivia. If Damien still believes I am convinced Ethan has been unfaithful, he will expect me to make emotional decisions. Olivia nodded. Exactly. Claire continued. He will expect me to pull away from my husband. He will expect rumors about separation. Ethan immediately understood where her thoughts were leading. Claire, absolutely not. She turned toward him. Why not? Because it would put you in the middle of something dangerous. Claire gave him the same steady look she had worn throughout the evening. You already put me in the middle of it the moment you decided to protect me by keeping me in the dark. Ethan lowered his eyes, unable to argue with the truth of her words. Olivia folded her hands together before speaking carefully. There is another board meeting next Thursday. Damien has been pushing for an emergency confidence vote regarding Ethan's leadership. We believe he intends to use another wave of negative publicity immediately beforehand. Claire's expression remained thoughtful. Then we give him exactly what he is expecting. Ethan looked up sharply. What are you saying? I am saying that tomorrow morning I move into the guest apartment above the art center. Ethan stared at her in disbelief. The press will notice. That is the point. Claire's voice remained calm. Neighbors will talk. Reporters will speculate. Damien will believe his plan is working. Olivia slowly leaned back in her chair, seeing the strategy unfold. If he believes the marriage is collapsing, he may become overconfident. Claire nodded. People make mistakes when they think they have already won. Ethan stood and walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city sparkling beneath thousands of lights. He rested one hand against the cool glass. "I spent 6 months trying to keep you safe." Claire quietly joined him. "And I spent 6 months believing you no longer trusted me." For several seconds neither spoke. Finally Ethan turned to face her. "If we do this, there is no guarantee everything works." Claire smiled gently, the first genuine smile of the evening. "There has never been a guarantee. Not when we signed our marriage contract. Not when we fell in love. Not even tonight." She reached into the cedar box she had brought downstairs earlier and removed the original contract. Instead of opening it, she simply placed it on the dining table beside the black flash drive. One document represented the beginning of their marriage. The other represented the truth that might save it. Olivia quietly closed her laptop. "Tomorrow morning I will leak nothing. I will simply make certain the people already watching see exactly what they expect to see." Claire looked once more at Ethan before speaking the words that would begin the final stage of Damien's carefully constructed plan without him ever realizing he had just walked into someone else's trap. "Let the whole city believe I am leaving my husband." The harder Damien celebrates, the less carefully he will hide what he does next. The next 6 days unfolded exactly as Claire had predicted. On Monday morning she carried 2 small suitcases into the community art center she had once fought so hard to save, smiling politely at curious neighbors who happened to notice. By lunchtime, photographs of her entering the building alone appeared online beside dramatic headlines announcing that the Sinclair marriage was finally falling apart. Television commentators discussed body language. Social media users claimed they had predicted the separation months earlier. Complete strangers debated the future of a marriage they had never witnessed. Claire ignored every headline. She spent her mornings teaching watercolor classes to children and her evenings quietly reviewing documents with Olivia inside a small office above the studio. Meanwhile, Ethan played his role just as carefully. He continued attending board meetings, investor lunches, and charity events alone. Every time reporters shouted questions about his marriage, he answered with the same calm sentence. "I do not discuss private family matters." His refusal only fueled more speculation. Exactly as expected, Sinclair Holdings stock slipped several percentage points during the week. Financial news programs questioned whether Ethan could continue leading the company through what they described as personal turmoil. Damien Cole appeared on business television expressing confidence that the board would make thoughtful decisions for shareholders. Claire watched one interview from the Art Center office and immediately noticed something she had never seen before. Damien smiled too often. He spoke like a man no longer worried about winning because he already believed the outcome belonged to him. Olivia noticed it too. "He is becoming comfortable," she said quietly. "Comfortable people become careless." Late Wednesday afternoon another piece of information quietly arrived. One of Olivia's investigators confirmed that Damien had scheduled a private dinner with 2 major investment partners immediately after Thursday night's charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The timing caught everyone's attention. The gala had always been one of Sinclair Holdings' highest-profile public events, attended by executives, investors, journalists, and philanthropic leaders from across the country. Ethan would be expected to deliver the keynote speech. Damien would almost certainly use the gathering to influence board members before Friday morning's confidence vote. Claire looked across the conference table. "Then that is where he expects to finish this." Ethan nodded slowly. "If he believes our marriage has collapsed, he may stop hiding his conversations." Olivia opened her laptop and displayed the evening schedule. Reporters will already be waiting outside because of the separation rumors. Every important financial journalist in New York will be there. Claire studied the schedule before quietly reaching a decision. "Then I will attend." Ethan looked up immediately. "No." Claire met his eyes without hesitation. "Everyone believes I am avoiding you. If I suddenly appear, Damien will think emotion brought me there, not strategy." Ethan walked toward her. "You have already done enough." Claire smiled gently. Years ago you told me our marriage deserved honesty instead of performance. Tonight I am finally giving you both. For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to believe they were standing on the same side again. Before leaving the office, Olivia handed each of them a small wireless earpiece. Tomorrow night, stay calm no matter what happens. Damien believes he is directing the story. Let him keep believing that until he writes the ending himself. By 7 o'clock the grand hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, its marble floors reflecting the warm light of hundreds of candles arranged among elegant floral displays. Business leaders, philanthropists, journalists, and investors filled the room with polished conversations and carefully rehearsed smiles. String musicians played softly from the balcony while cameras flashed near the entrance every few seconds. As expected, Ethan Sinclair arrived alone. Reporters immediately surrounded him with questions about his marriage, but he simply smiled politely and continued toward the ballroom without answering a single one. Across the room, Damian Cole watched everything unfold with quiet satisfaction hidden beneath professional courtesy. He greeted board members, shook hands with investors, and accepted congratulations that had not yet been earned. Several financial reporters noticed the confidence in his demeanor and quietly followed him, hoping for a headline before the evening ended. Then, precisely 20 minutes after Ethan's arrival, another wave of camera flashes erupted near the entrance. Every conversation inside the ballroom seemed to pause at once. Claire Bennett had arrived. She wore a simple midnight blue gown, elegant without demanding attention, her hair loosely gathered behind her shoulders. She did not look angry. She did not look heartbroken. She simply looked composed. The surprise spread through the room faster than any announcement could have. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses while photographers rushed toward the entrance, convinced they were about to witness a public confrontation. Claire walked calmly through the crowd until she reached Ethan. For one brief second they looked at each other without speaking. The tiny earpiece hidden beneath Claire's hair carried Olivia's quiet voice. Everyone is watching. Stay with the plan. Claire offered Ethan a polite nod, no more intimate than two colleagues greeting each other before a meeting. It was exactly restrained enough to keep the rumors alive. Damien smiled to himself from across the ballroom. The separation was real. His strategy had worked. Moments later the evening program began. The chairman welcomed guests before inviting Ethan to deliver the keynote address celebrating the company's newest community education initiative. Ethan stepped onto the stage with calm confidence despite the tension surrounding him. As he spoke about opportunity, education, and responsibility, Claire noticed Damien quietly slipping toward a side corridor with two influential investors. Olivia's voice returned through the earpiece. He is moving exactly as expected. Claire excused herself from a nearby conversation and slowly followed at a comfortable distance, appearing to wander through the gallery rather than pursuing anyone. She stopped near a marble column just as Damien began speaking in lowered tones. She could not hear every word, but she heard enough. Tomorrow's vote changes everything, Damien said with unmistakable confidence. Once Sinclair loses control, the acquisition proceeds immediately. One investor hesitated. And if Ethan recovers? Damien smiled. He will not. Public trust is already gone. Claire remained perfectly still, her heartbeat quickening as she realized Damien truly believed the story he had created. Before she could step away, Olivia quietly appeared from another hallway carrying her phone. She glanced toward Claire almost imperceptibly before whispering into her own earpiece. We have the conversation recorded. Do not interrupt. He is giving us exactly what we needed. Claire slowly looked back toward the brightly lit ballroom where Ethan continued speaking about integrity before hundreds of applauding guests. For the first time in months, she understood the painful irony of the moment. The man the world doubted was standing on stage speaking about honesty, while the man receiving quiet admiration in the shadows had just revealed the truth that would finally expose everything. Applause filled the ballroom as Ethan stepped away from the podium, but before guests could return to their conversations, Olivia appeared beside the master of ceremonies and quietly handed him a small envelope. A brief exchange followed. The master of ceremonies looked surprised, then nodded before returning to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with careful professionalism, "before we conclude tonight's program, there is an important corporate statement that has been authorized by Sinclair Holdings legal counsel." A ripple of curiosity swept through the room. Damien remained perfectly composed, although his smile faded ever so slightly. Olivia walked onto the stage carrying the same silver laptop Claire had seen at dinner only days before. Ethan joined her without hesitation. Across the ballroom, Claire watched every face turn toward the stage. The room that had spent months believing rumors was finally about to meet the truth. Olivia connected the laptop to the enormous presentation screen suspended above the ballroom. Instead of financial charts, security footage appeared. The conference room. Damien's voice. His own words discussing reputation, shareholder panic, and the plan to remove Ethan from leadership. A quiet murmur spread through the audience. The recording continued with financial records, manipulated reports, and the uncropped photographs that revealed investigators, attorneys, and security personnel standing only a few feet beyond the tabloid camera angles. Every carefully manufactured scandal dissolved before hundreds of witnesses in a matter of minutes. Journalists who had spent months reporting the affair immediately began taking new notes. Camera operators redirected their lenses away from Ethan and toward Damien. Several board members looked at one another with stunned expressions. Damien stepped forward, forcing a confident smile. "These recordings have been taken completely out of context." Before anyone could respond, Olivia calmly displayed another document on the screen. It was a timeline connecting confidential meeting schedules with the publication times of anonymous gossip articles. Every leak traced back to the same internal source. Damien's corporate office. The room fell silent once more. Then Claire slowly walked onto the stage. No one had expected her to speak. She looked across the audience before turning toward Damien. "For months," she said calmly, "I believed my husband had betrayed my trust because someone wanted me to believe exactly that." She paused, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "The easiest way to weaken a good leader is not always through business. Sometimes you simply convince the people who love him to stop believing in him." Those words landed far deeper than any accusation. Several guests quietly lowered their eyes. Ethan looked at Claire with unmistakable gratitude. She had every reason to resent him, yet she had chosen truth over pride. Moments later, representatives from the independent corporate investigation entered the ballroom and spoke privately with several board members before approaching Damien. He attempted to defend his actions, but the evidence already displayed throughout the room spoke more clearly than any explanation could. Within minutes, the chairman announced that Damien had been immediately removed from all executive responsibilities pending the outcome of the formal investigation. Reporters rushed toward the exits to file breaking stories, no longer chasing rumors but documented facts. As the ballroom gradually emptied, Claire remained standing beside Ethan beneath the fading lights. She looked at him quietly before asking the one question that had lived in her heart since the night she mailed the invitation. "Why did you think carrying this alone was the only way to protect me?" Ethan did not answer immediately. After a long silence, he looked into her eyes and said softly, "Because losing my company would have hurt less than losing your faith. I just never realized that keeping you in the dark was the fastest way to lose both." 1 year later, the first snow of December drifted gently across Manhattan, covering rooftops and quiet streets with a thin blanket of white. Inside the newly restored Bennett Community Arts Center, children laughed as they carried fresh paintings toward a brightly lit gallery where parents admired colorful landscapes, family portraits, and dreams carefully captured on canvas. The building that had once faced closure now welcomed hundreds of young artists every week through a foundation jointly funded by Sinclair Holdings and local community partners. Above the entrance, a bronze plaque carried a simple message. "Kindness grows stronger when truth protects it." Claire paused near the front windows, watching a little girl proudly show her watercolor painting to her father. Moments like that had always reminded her why she fought so hard for this place. She no longer wore the weight of unanswered questions on her shoulders. Instead, there was a quiet confidence that came only after surviving a storm together rather than alone. Across the room, Ethan stood helping a group of children hang framed artwork along a newly painted wall. The billionaire who once spent every waking hour inside boardrooms now reserved every Friday afternoon for the arts center, insisting no meeting mattered more than keeping promises that changed lives. The company had recovered faster than financial analysts expected. New corporate transparency policies had become a model for other organizations, and Sinclair Holdings had expanded its education initiatives into cities across the country. Olivia Hart continued serving as the company's chief legal advisor, although newspaper headlines now described her very differently. Instead of rumors, they wrote about integrity, accountability, and one of the most successful corporate investigations in recent years. She walked into the gallery carrying a familiar white bakery box and smiled as Claire laughed. "Apple cinnamon again?" Olivia nodded. Some traditions deserve to survive. The three of them shared an easy laugh that would have seemed impossible only a year earlier. Later that evening, after the last guests had gone home and the children's paintings rested quietly beneath soft gallery lights, Ethan asked Claire to join him in the small studio where she had taught her very first class. On an old wooden table rested two familiar objects: the original marriage contract and the ivory dinner invitation that had changed everything. Both had been carefully framed beneath museum glass. Claire looked at them for several silent moments before Ethan spoke. "This contract gave us a beginning, but it never gave us a marriage." He gently lifted the framed invitation instead. "This did. Because it forced us to stop protecting each other with silence." He reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small velvet box. Instead of opening it immediately, he smiled with the same warmth she remembered from the day they accidentally fell in love while pretending not to. 3 years ago we signed paperwork because it seemed practical. Today I want to ask you something without contracts, lawyers, board members, or conditions." He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the warm studio light. "Claire Bennett, will you marry me again, this time because we both know that trust is something we choose every single day?" Tears filled Claire's eyes as she laughed softly and nodded. "Yes. Every day." Outside, snow continued falling over the city, but inside the little art studio there was only warmth, quiet laughter, and a peaceful certainty that the most extraordinary love stories are never built on perfect beginnings. They are built on ordinary people who choose truth over fear, forgiveness over pride, and each other over every rumor the world is willing to believe.